I'm Stuart McIntosh with the BBC News. Hello. The Turkish parliament has ratified Sweden's bid to join NATO by an overwhelming majority in a long-delayed vote. President Erdogan is expected to sign the legislation. Hungary is now the sole NATO member yet to ratify Sweden's accession. Orla Guerin is in Istanbul.
It's almost 2 years since Sweden applied for membership of NATO, and of course all the member countries have to agree. Now, Turkey put up a series of roadblocks. In particular, President Erdogan was objecting to Sweden being, as he saw it, too lenient on members of groups on Swedish soil that Turkey regards as terrorists, for example, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK. But he has also linked agreeing Sweden joining NATO to the White House going ahead with the sale of F-16 fighter jets to Ankara.
Donald Trump is seeking to land a knockout blow in Tuesday's New Hampshire primaries to become the Republican nominee in the US presidential elections. His last remaining Republican rival, Nikki Haley, will be fighting for a strong vote to keep her hopes alive. Opinion polls suggest Mr. Trump is the clear front-runner. Carl Nassman has been talking to Trump supporters in New Hampshire.
We've seen plenty of surrogates, lots of politicians who are now coming out to support him. They are in the state. We're even talking about some former rivals. So Vivek Ramaswamy, Tim Scott. These are people that were just a few days or months ago running against the president. Now they're advocating for him. What they say is if this is another big win for Donald Trump, then Nikki Haley should drop out. They want unity within the Republican Party. They want to start that general election campaigning against President Joe Biden as soon as possible.
The UN Secretary-General has told the Security Council that any refusal to accept the two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict must be firmly rejected because it was the only answer to endless cycles of violence. Antonio Guterres was alluding to Israel's Prime Minister scotching the idea last week.
Last week's clear and repeated rejection of the two-state solution at the highest level of the Israeli government is unacceptable. And this was despite the strongest appeals from even the friends of Israel, including those sitting around this table. This refusal and the denial of the right to statehood to the Palestinian people would indefinitely prolong a conflict that has become a major threat to global peace and security.
The Pentagon says US forces have carried out strikes in Iraq against facilities linked to Iran-backed militia. A US statement said proportionate strikes had been carried out on 3 locations used by the Kataib Hezbollah group and other Iran-affiliated factions. The US action follows a weekend missile attack on an Iraqi airbase. World News from the BBC. President Bola Tinubu of Nigeria has discussed West African security issues with the visiting US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who's on a 4-country African tour. The two allies are fighting Islamist militants in the region. A man has been arrested in South Africa after claiming to have started a deadly fire last August in a building in a Johannesburg suburb. Police said the 29-year-old man was giving evidence to an inquiry into the blaze. Here's Daniel De Simone.
The arrested man is said to have claimed the fire started after he tried to burn the body of a man he'd murdered while high on drugs. The suspect was arrested after the hearing. The force said he's expected to appear in court soon on charges of arson, 76 counts of murder and 120 counts of attempted murder. The fire at the Usendiso building on 31st of August last year claimed at least 77 lives and left many injured. The building was home to hundreds of people, some of the poorest in South African society.
Doctors in the United States have used a breakthrough gene therapy technique to give hearing to a profoundly deaf Moroccan boy. 11-year-old Aissam Dam has a rare abnormality in a single gene that prevented the tiny hairs in his inner ear from converting sound vibrations into chemical signals recognized by the brain. Doctors inserted a harmless virus in his ear that transported a specific gene to stimulate the repair of his hair cells. Aissam has now mild to moderate hearing loss. The former Africa Cup of Nations champions Algeria have been knocked out of this year's football competition by one of the lowest-ranking teams, Mauritania. The 1-0 defeat gives Mauritania their first-ever place in the final 16. The Algerians depart without winning a single match. And that is the BBC News.